Welcome to our Introduction to Java series. This is part 7 of this series where we're learning about multi-dimensional arrays. So what are multi-dimensional arrays? Multi-dimensional arrays help us represent matrices or tables inside Java, or actually any other programming language as well. Within Java, this is how we declare a multi-dimensional array. So here I have our multi-dimensional array. This is an int multi-dimensional array called matrix, and it is initialized to have our rows and columns at the length of 5. When we declare a multi-dimensional array like this, since int is a primitive type, it will default to 0. So here we have our multi-dimensional array represented as a table, and all the values are 0. You can specify a specific row and column and set its value. So in this case, I am saying the matrix at row 3, column 2 has a value of 5. And you can see here that it has been updated to 5. So this is the visual representation of when we declare a multi-dimensional array in Java. There's another way to declare arrays. We learned this in our last part 6 of arrays, which was an array initializer. Multi-dimensional arrays actually are just a bunch of arrays inside another array. So our row to our columns, our row holds an array. So in this case, this is the multiplication table up to 3, and I am using an array initializer to make this multiplication table right here. So we have our 0, 1, 2, 3 for our columns, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 for our rows. Remember, we start counting at 0. This multiplication table can be translated using an array initializer as such. And as you can see, it looks like an array in an array. So that is our multi-dimensional arrays. Going one step further, since a multi-dimensional array holds basically a bunch of different arrays, we can actually have different lengths on each one of our rows. This is called a ragged array. So here is our ragged arrays. So in this example, I'm showing you a triangle, and it holds basically we have 4 rows, and in this case I'm just making it look like a triangle going down. So our triangle has 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the next row has a different length, and this length happens to be 3, and this length for our next row 2 and 1. So you can declare a ragged array if you know all the values up front as such using an array initializer. Maybe you don't know all the values, it's slowly going to get populated. In that case, you can do a declaration for a multi-dimensional array using this syntax. So you have your int, bracket, bracket, ragged array equals new int, and you must declare how many rows there are. So you have to declare the rows, then you can leave the columns blank. And now when you go inside each one of the rows for your ragged array, you can then declare the length and initialize the array index there. Now remember, this also has to be an int. It's holding ints. So your types have to match in our multi-dimensional arrays. So we've learned the fundamentals of what a multi-dimensional array is. Now let's work with them in code. So this is part 7 of our series. So I'm going to make a new package and call this part 7. And first we are going to do some 2-dimensional array examples. So I'm going to call this 2-dimensional array examples. Let's make our main method. What's that? Public static void main string args. So let's first declare an array, a multidimensional array, we'll call it matrix, and let's randomly assign some values to our matrix. So what we went over in the slides was that we could make int bracket bracket, call it matrix, equals new int, and let's set this to have the rows to have a length of 5 and our columns to have a length of 5. For loops are oftenly used to process two-dimensional arrays. We have a for loop that loops through the number of rows, and then another for loop nested inside it that loops through our columns. So we say for int, and we'll call this row, starts at 0. Row is less than, how do we get the length? Well, we say matrix dot length. This gets the row length for our multi-dimensional array. And then row plus plus. Now we are doing a nested for loop. So we're putting another for loop inside it to now loop through the number of columns in our matrix for that specific row. So we say for int column equals 0, column is less than matrix, and now we specifically put our row number in it. Remember that right now we have exactly the same, it's 5, 5. But I showed you before that we could do ragged arrays where each row could be a different length. So this is how you can dynamically handle that. Row dot length. Now this is getting the amount of columns. Column plus plus. So this is a nested for loop, a for loop inside another for loop. Now we want to randomly set the values. So we will say matrix, row, column equals, in this case, we're going to do int. We're casting because we're doing our math.random, which math.random is a double, so we need to cast it to become an int. And we're going to do a random value between 0 and 99. So this will be math.random times 100. Now we have initialized, we have initialized our matrix, and then we have set each value to a random number between 0 and 100. Let's write a little comment here. Sets value to random number between 0 and 99. Random. But how do we see? All right, so we've initialized our array, we've set random values between 0 and 99. Now I want to see what it is. So we can, again, do a nested for loop and print out. Now we can do this all in one go, but what we're leading to is that we're going to create this, and then we are going to learn how to receive multi-dimensional arrays from our methods and then send multi-dimensional arrays as parameters to our methods. So that's why we're breaking up this code right now. So for int row, just as before. So I'm actually going to copy this for loop. So this is our for loop. It's been copied. Our brackets, make sure that you've closed both of them. And now we want to print out. So this will be system.out.print. And we're going to print the matrix row and column. And what I'm going to do is print each value put a space in between, and then when it's a new row, we're going to do a line break. So we're going to just say plus a little space, and then at the end, so this will print out every single one of the values in our column. Once we are done printing all the values in our column, we want to print a line break. So system.out.print line. Nothing passed. So let's run this code and see what we get. So yours will be different from mine because we are making random values here, but this is the array that has been created, and we've created the array and then we have outprinted the array. So now we know how to populate values. You can probably extend this to thinking about how you would use a scanner and get user input, right? And you've also learned how to outprint it. So now let's take these skills and use it to get multidimensional arrays from a method and send multidimensional arrays to a method. We have our workings right here. So let's first return a two-dimensional array. So I'm going to make a new method and call this public int. It's returning a two-dimensional integer array. I'm going to call this get matrix. And the two parameters I'm going to pass are the length, because what I want to do is make this a dynamic matrix that gets created. So I'm going to call this int row length and int column length. So I'm going to call it call length just to save us some characters. We have our code right here. So I'm going to copy this code and delete it and paste it here. Now, instead of hard coding our 5 and 5, this is going to be row length and column length. Now, we are setting up our matrix. We are randomly setting the value between 0 and 99. The last thing that we need to do is return, right? So return matrix. So this method gives us back a matrix that randomly has set the values between 0 and 99. So here we obviously have a matrix here that is getting our red, so we need to actually get it back, right? So int matrix equals get matrix. In this case, to repeat what we did last time, let's just pass 5 and 5. And I forgot one thing, because we are inside a static method. We put static. It's just a tiny mistake, but we're all human. So our int matrix, get matrix, we're returning our row length and our column length. So let's run this code, make sure that we didn't break anything. And we ran it, and there's our output, random numbers again, but everything is working. So now we have learned how to retrieve a multidimensional array from a method. It's not that difficult, is it? It's really just the same as what we've been doing before, just an extra square bracket. So now let's pass a multidimensional array to a method. So in this case, we're going to make a method called print matrix. So this is public static, and it's void because we're just going to be printing out. So nothing to return, public static void, and we'll call this print matrix. This is going to receive a multidimensional array. In this case, int bracket matrix. We already have our code. It's right here, right? So let's copy our code. We'll delete it. Paste. So this is our print matrix method. expecting a matrix, everything is working the same as before. So now we need to call print matrix. So print matrix passes our little matrix here. So let's run this code, make sure it's still working. And there we go. So now we have learned how to receive a multidimensional array from a method and also how to pass a multidimensional array from our method. Let's do one more method with our two-dimensional arrays, and this will be a summation of all the elements in our array. So let's make one new method here, and we'll call this public static int, because we're going to sum all of our integers together. We'll call this sum matrix. And this will pass our int bracket matrix. So in this case, we are going to do a sum of all of our elements together and then return that. So we can say int total and set it to 0. And what we'll end up returning is the total after we have summed everything. We can use our for loops again. So I'm going to just copy this for loops here. So we go through each of our rows and then our column, and we can say total plus equals our matrix at row and column. We need one more bracket right here. So what this does is going to sum each item in here in our for each row and column. It will go through each element, sum it up to create our total, and then it will return our total. Add our semicolon for our return our total. So let's see what the sum is of our random matrix. So let's call here system.out.println, and we'll put a quote, the sum of our matrix is, we'll say plus sum matrix, and pass our matrix. Let's run this. Again, when you run this with me, it's going to be a different amount than mine because we are making random values. There we go. Except I forgot a little space so it doesn't look as pretty. So the sum of our matrix is, in this case, is 1,327. So now we have learned how to return a multidimensional array. We've learned how to pass a multidimensional array as a parameter. We've also learned how to work with them. In this case, this is a simple summation, but there are other things that we can do. Like, for instance, when we did that multiplication table, you could create a multiplication table here that then, for each one of your matrix at row and column, it's equal to the row times the column, right? So you can kind of imagine what you can do now with your multidimensional arrays. So I will see you next time when we're going to go over objects and classes.